Hey Gearheads, and welcome to GT Garage Talk, a discussion about all things automotive. I am your host, Corey, and on this week's episode, I'm very excited because this week's guest in Alexandra Cheney is absolutely like the intersection of everything that I do and I want to do, and that is travel and cars, or cars and travel, as the case may be. But she is an accomplished writer, lifestyle influencer. I don't exactly want to paint her that way. I hate the term influencer, but she is absolutely deeply ingrained in both cars and travel. She is the editor for Elite Traveler, and that allows her access to awesome destinations and awesome vehicles. And she will explain it a whole lot better than I do. So without further ado, we welcome on Alexandra Cheney. So grateful to have Alexandra Cheney with me today to talk about a little bit of automotive, maybe a little bit of travel, maybe a little bit of everything. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm excited because what you do, and we'll get into that in a second, kind of intersects what I do and what my wife does. So my wife is in the travel and tourism industry. She's in marketing. I'm in automotive and essentially in marketing. So I'll roll all that into what exactly is it that you do?
That's excellent. Funnily enough, it's a lot of what you just outlined, you and your wife does, is quite similar to what I do, just in terms of I call myself a travel writer and a culture reporter.
Okay.
So think of like a big Costco beach umbrella. That's, travel editorial. So that's looking at lifestyle, fitness, wellness, adventure, auto, watches, design, and covering it from an editorial standpoint. And then I also do some media training and some brand consulting, but that's all kind of word of mouth by referral. And that's kind of my trifecta of how I run my life. Yeah.
And given that wide Costco umbrella, that's how
Yes.
automotive fits into that whole puzzle as well, correct? It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
one of those many things under that umbrella.
Yeah, it's the parasol under the umbrella, if you will. Yes, and to me, I cover almost exclusively, luxury vehicles. So what that means is I'm really looking at that audience and speaking to those consumers or those aspirational consumers who are also traveling, who are also likely into a variety of other things that I cover, whether it's, home and design or watches, all of those things to me intersect in various degrees and places.
Going back to that lifestyle aspect of it all.
Correct.
So what brands, I mean, it's Cart Podcast. I got to dive into it.
Yes, let's go.
What brands are you heavily involved with in the automotive space? And what does that look like for you?
So, within the automotive space, my primary place that I write is Elite Traveler, and I'm their motoring pages editor, and I've been that for more than a handful of years at this point. So, I'm working with, Audi, Bentley, Aston Martin, Jaguar, Land Rover, Rolls Royce, Rivian, think $80,000 and up. Let's go.
Yeah.
Lamborghini, Maserati. Let's not forget the Italians,
Yes.
Ferrari. Uh, all of the ones that are in their swan song years of natural aspiration. How's that?
Yes. Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because we are in a very interesting place in the automotive industry, and you've got brands, even going back to the Italians, like Alfa Romeo. I was just at a press
Hmm.
event with their U.S. President leader mentioning how the brand is in process of promoting their last gasoline-powered new vehicle, and that's the Tonale. And to think they've got 112 years of history, heritage, racing, all that good stuff is baked into their DNA, and it's that typical Italian, beautiful design and et cetera, et cetera. But here they are promoting their last brand new gas powered anything. It's
Hmm.
a very interesting direction that we're going, and especially in that premium space. So it'll be really interesting to see how some of these other players who have kind of been mum on what they're doing, what their future plans are, how they navigate this world where everyone else has said, yeah, well we're going electric.
Without question. And it's actually quite funny. I was at a Bentley dinner, I want to say a couple weeks ago. And there are those car guys who get into the like absolute weeds of talking about what's going on in the automotive space,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
And I was at more of a lifestyle focused dinner. It was actually really cool. Bentley was talking about their name audio, which if you haven't been in a Bentley and turned it up to 11, you are missing out. Like really, really do that. They do a great job. Honestly, as does Mercedes with their 4D sound.
Yes.
Anytime there's a speaker in a seat, I'm in. Sign me up. But we're getting away from the point. I was sitting next to VG Matthews, who is obviously the head of Rob Report automotive coverage. He's a good friend of mine. And we were around a bunch of other folks who weren't necessarily as into the day to day car of it
Mm-hmm.
all as we are. And it was quite funny because we are normally categorized as like the lifestyle folks, you know. So when we're on car trips, we're like, oh yeah, they're the lifestyle. You know, we're not the buff books. We're not the like everyday living and breathing it. And it was so funny because we were having a conversation about the notion of not only naturally aspirated vehicles, but the idea of, turbochargers and superchargers and the difference between that and having, a motor for every wheel and
Mm-hmm.
what electric meant and why this is so exciting because at the end of the day, and actually this was the focus of my story for the fall issue of Elite Traveler, this is the first time in our lifetime, in my opinion, where car brands aren't chasing superlatives. They're in the mud and they're messing up and they're creating cars that don't necessarily make a lot of sense unless you look at it in a linear way. It's like there are absolutely moments where you're going to see a car and be like, why, in 20 years, why did a car brand make this car like this? And it's like, well, it's the evolution of
Mm-hmm.
going from, superchargers and turbochargers and naturally aspirated and transitioning into plug-in hybrids or fully electric or hybrids and you're watching this like really cool experimentation happen where it's not the fastest and the best and the most. It's kind of like, how do we do this? And it's the image I have in my head is almost like the East Coast taffy, how you like pull
Yeah.
it apart and put it together and pull it apart. And it's like that's what's going on right now. And to me, and Viju and I were geeking out on this a little bit, that's really exciting. Like, it's weird, but it's really exciting because you're thinking about developing a vehicle in a completely different way.
Yep.
So,
It's interesting that you bring that up because this vehicle may fall out of the scope of the realm in which you live, but Mazda has a vehicle for sale in the US right now that definitely fits that why kind of question. Like you look at it and you go, huh? And I recently had the luxury, the blessing of getting to test one, and that's their MX-30 little electric crossover. It is sold exclusively in California for EV purposes. It is their first electrified anything, so hybrid or electric anything. It is 100% electric with 100 miles of range on a full charge and cost $33,000, which taking all of the 100 miles of range out of it, it was actually a rather fun, quirky, fun, cool little car. But going back to your point, it's just like, but why exactly?
yeah.
Like, uh, I, I get my cars out of Dallas, Texas, which is, and I know this from experience now, 93 miles away. And in order to get that vehicle, I had to agree to go pick it up instead of having it
Okay.
delivered,
Yep.
which took a lot of planning on my part because
Yep.
100 miles of range, 93-mile trip, 104-degree Texas summer heat, made for a fun, we'll say a fun experience. And then I had to drop it back off. So,
Right.
but yeah, we are definitely in that era of transition. I
Hmm.
remember like it was big news when Ferrari announced that they were not going to make
Yep.
naturally aspirated V8s anymore. Like
Right.
that was huge. And now we're flirting and all out married to this idea of, well, gasoline's going away. So get used to it. And it's like, there are some brands that that's their DNA.
Oh, that's tricky. I don't know if I fully agree with that. I mean, Ferrari, I drove the 296 GTB. I drove it on the roads of Sevilla in Spain, and then I drove it on a circuit, on the circuit Monte Blanco, also
Okay.
in just outside of Sevilla. And granted, that is not a $30,000 Mazda. Uh, but they're making a statement, and it absolutely felt like a Ferrari and it handled like a Ferrari. And to be able to push engineers every year at Monterey Car Week at Pebble Beach, which is obviously coming up, I interview Jay Leno. And every year he says versions of the same thing, but in completely different ways. He believes engineers are going to save the world. And in a lot of ways, right now, I believe engineers are going to completely reconstruct the car industry as we know it. And to me, that's really exciting. I don't think gas is going away anytime soon. I think we're in a transition phase, and as that trickles down from a super premium automaker like a Ferrari, McLaren, Bentley, any of those folks, down to Ford, with their Lightning, down to Mazda, that's huge to go from kind of those peak um, selected consumers to mass market.
Mm-hmm.
I'm super excited. I haven't been in one yet, but one's coming my way. I'm really pumped to get into a Ford Maverick.
Yeah.
Like, yes, cool to be able to appeal to that market for a starting price of $20,000. It's not something that I outright cover,
Right.
but it absolutely influences the market, and I think it absolutely gives brands a way to look at each other where we're really good at putting things in boxes as humans, right? That's how our
Mm-hmm.
brain works. This has to go in this box, this has to go in this box, that's it. So you have your premium automakers and that's it, and you have your mass market automakers and that's it, and you've got a couple of people who play, a couple of brands that play
Right.
in the middle space, right? But for a brand like, McLaren that I adore, or Aston Martin that I have a great relationship with, to have them even have the Fords of the world on their radar, and to be saying, huh, let's take a look at this, or hey, they have, this amount of market sway. I mean, Toyota, they were the OG, right, with the
Yeah.
Prius. Uh, that's really interesting to me, to see how everyone is working together. And then, of course, you've got the VW groups of the world, where you've got a parent company. Let's go back to the Costco Beach umbrella, right? Where Bentley is going into the pantry of VW.
Right.
And then there's the Porsche of it all. But then there's also the Mate Rimac of it all. So I just don't think we've ever been in a time where mass market and premium are, I'm not going to say working together, because I don't necessarily think that's the correct way to categorize it, but they're kind of, peeking over their shoulder and saying, that's interesting. Engineers, we should maybe take a look at this thing that we've never thought about taking a look at before. And that's, once again, exciting.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. We'll take Dodge, for example. So their current MO in the market, They have three vehicles. All of them, you can get a Hellcat powered engine under the hood. They make a lot of noise, and they're pretty much. They hired somebody that's the chief donut maker, talking about just making insane power, putting it down, and having fun. This is who they are, and they're trying to figure out, okay, what does an electrified Dodge look like? So what you were talking about with Ferrari, what does an electrified Ferrari look like? How do we make something that is quintessentially us? It is our brand. You get in it, you know it, you feel it, but we're taking out a key element in that gas powered engine. And yes, using that diversity of portfolio, it is quite interesting to see, who's borrowing from who's learning from who, and just kind of again that weird transition period that we are all in right now.
Well, I look at it as an evolution. I don't look at it as you're gaining or losing anything. When seatbelts came around, it was like, oh my God, how are we going to change the seats to make sure the seatbelts obviously work, but also don't change the interior of the car? Think about, old kind of Cadillac bench seats, if you will. Introduction of airbags, same thing. That changed, the way a steering wheel looked. That changed the way, if you were sitting in the front seat and you looked across the full dashboard, it changed the shape, right?
Mm.
How do you keep the integrity of the interior of the car whilst introducing these new and soon to be mandatory advancements? To me, this is just another technological advancement. So it's, yes, how do you introduce it, but you pump up the other things, the other characteristics, the other DNA. Like Ferrari, let's go to the 296 GTB, right? The DNA, if you were to park it, even next to an old school California, right? If you were to park it next to, what do they have in their portfolio right now? F8 Spider. I don't think you go, oh, that's the electric one. Like the architecture is the same. A lot of the through lines are the same. The inspiration, Ferraris, they're masters at this, right? Looking back into their DNA, looking back into their heritage and saying, okay, we're going to take this through line, this ridge line, this grill from the 60s, and we're going to reinterpret it, right? They did that with the Roma. We're going to reinterpret that and modernize it for today. So I think it's not, oh no, we're going electric, we're going to lose who we are. I think it's, okay, what, if it's an abacus, what are we kind of pushing up and pumping up here? And what are we kind of subtracting and changing down here? And playing with that, which to me is really fun.
Yeah, and you mentioned it earlier, the avenues in which it opens, where you can have a separate, essentially, powertrain for each individual wheel, and
Mm-hmm.
the physics that you can bend with that kind of engineering that we haven't really gotten to sample up until this current environment that we're in, where we're always trying to torque vectoring and limited slip differentials, and all this stuff almost just takes an exponential leap up, because you're not trying to get one power source out to four wheels. You can do whatever you need given the situation. And hats off to the engineers that can truly capitalize on that the best throughout the
Mm-hmm.
process.
Well, all wheel steering, right? That's a great example of what you're going to be able to do. You have a different way than before
Mm-hmm.
to get into that. And I mean that for city driving, I'm based in Los Angeles. That changes the game. I was just in the new Range Rover, and it's like, ooh, you can turn like that? Hello. Okay.
Yeah,
This is exciting.
one thing that I've tried weaving into several of my car reviews lately is how well in real world scenarios, because we can all read the spec sheet and see the turning radius and all that.
Hmm.
But in real life, what does this car turn like? Can't
Right.
if you miss your turn, how big of a U-turn are you gonna have to make?
Hmm.
How narrow of a road can you turn around on? And so yes, I've sampled a few vehicles with rear steering, and it's again just those small things that add up to a big and noticeable difference for the consumer. It's like, wow, okay, so here's something that shouldn't do what it is doing. For example, I drove a $420,000 Rolls Royce Cullinan off
Hmm.
road, which
Hmm.
when I first got behind the wheel, I was with a product specialist, and she's like, "Well, do you want to take the off road course?" And I was like, let's go on road first. One, I'm in the first ever Rolls I've ever been in. I want to see, how this thing goes down the road. And two, it costs twice as much as my house, and I know what I've been doing off road in the TRX. I'm not quite sure but yes, just the advancements that those technological and engineering feats
Hmm.
add to the end product is
Hmm.
quite impressive.
Well, and complete side note, shout out to Rolls because when the SUV of it all,
Mm,
right, came about when, oh man, who launched their SUVs? Lambo launched their SUV, the super high,
right,
intense, fast. To me, it's like a super sport SUV,
right.
right? Aston Martin, uh, Rolls Royce, which they called it a high-sided vehicle, which gets me every time. I actually joke with them. I'm like, guys,
They got to
really?
do it in their own unique way,
I know, I know. I love it because it's so right. We were talking earlier about brand DNA. That is Rolls-Royce to a T, right? But deep appreciation. When I was on the launch, it was in Jackson Hole. We went up a mountain,
Mm,
and truly, the guys that I was with in the vehicle looked at me and they were like, "Go break it," and it was just like, okay, you know, because that brand ethos is such the absolute pinnacle of
mm-hmm,
luxury that to take the notion of the absolute pinnacle of luxury and make an absolute pinnacle of luxury off-road vehicle,
mm-hmm.
you have to be able to stand behind it. And we got those cars dirty and we rock crawled and I thought for a second I was on a Jaguar Land Rover program, not a Rolls Royce program, because they went for it.
Yep.
And to me, that is an amazing evolution of you have your architecture of luxury. You have so many like perfection bells and whistles. But then to take that into the SUV marketplace and have that vehicle hold up, that was a really great evolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to then take that and say, okay, how are we going to re engineer the guts and make something that's a plug in, that's electric? What is that next step? How do we keep pushing? I think, in a way, brands have prepared for this in a lot of ways they don't even realize.
Right.
So that transition is like, okay, you just I think it's in some ways a tougher sell to folks like us
Right.
than it is to consumers because it's like, okay, this is the next thing we came out with and this is our brand. Trust us. This is our next move.
When you live and breathe
And
it every day, you get very particular about what it means
well,
to
that's
you and what you feel like it is. But I've brought my wife into car reviews, and
mm-hmm,
I'll do one video where it's just me, the gearhead, lifelong. I'm like, this is what I think of this car, blah 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 blah, and then later in the week I'll drop a video where she reviews it, and I'm with her, and she comes at it in a completely different way. She is
absolutely.
the average consumer, and all the things that guys like me say. We'll take the Supra for example. It's not a Supra because BMW made it, and yada 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 yada. But when I drove that car home, she came and stole it almost immediately. She didn't care who made it. It looked good, it sounded good, it performed well. it checked all the boxes for what a sports car should be. And again, going into branding and marketing, there are some things that you have to hold as a brand standard, but outside of that, there's more wiggle room than guys like me, I would say, allow.
Well, that's the enthusiast, right? That's the burden of being an
Right.
enthusiast. And I think that comes down to, I don't think that's car specific at all.
Oh,
I
absolutely
come
not.
across that constantly in timepieces, for example, where it's like, okay, but this crown or this case and this doesn't quite, and it's like, okay, but how does it look? How does it feel on the wrist? Obviously, it keeps time.
Right.
Uh, and that's our job in a lot of ways, right? But it's really fantastic when you can take a step back and kind of say, huh, where and how does it matter when it does matter? And when is it just us picking things apart because that's our job?
Right. Yeah. Bringing it to a very macular view, uh, I am not a comic book nerd by any means, but to go
Okay.
online with every Marvel movie that comes out and to see all the vitriol of, oh, they didn't hold true to the character or this or that. And I come out of the theater and I'm like, oh, that was really good. Or that wasn't really good. Yes, it is absolutely that enthusiast passion, that bent that we bring, and bias that we bring to the table that sometimes we just need to check out the door, right?
Without question. However, I would say in this moment, the thing, the topic, the conversations that I find myself having around sustainability and vehicles
Mhm.
to me is new and exciting and is something that I find is leveling the playing field in terms of not only brand, where you fall, as we spoke earlier, in that spectrum of, premium, super
Mhm.
luxury to mass market, but also from enthusiast to, your wife to average consumer. Because the conversation that I find is, again, across the board is how do we redefine luxury
Mhm.
and what is that? Because I think there's an enormous push both from within the industry and from outside of the industry to talk about sustainability, to talk about life cycle, to talk about, okay, well, we're creating all of these batteries. What happens when they die? Because we can't just throw them in a landfill, and we shouldn't just throw them in a landfill. And to me, that conversation is the most, look at me using superlatives, the most interesting crossing
Mhm.
of lifestyle and engineering that I've seen in the car world in, I can't even tell you how long. That intersection of, but wait, this is lifestyle, this matters to everyone because it matters what it feels like, how it works, what it feels like when you touch it, but what it's made of, how it's made, what happens when I get rid of the car is so much also like the car nerd. And let me be clear, I love nerds. They're truly one of my favorite groups of people because it's your peak passion, right?
Right.
I love it when you're crazy passionate about something. I want to talk to you. However, an aside, that intersection right now is the most interesting conversation happening in the car world for me.
So you've kind of cut me off guard. I don't remember the name or the channel, but I do remember seeing an MSNBC YouTube video highlighting a former Tesla executive that left and
Mm-hmm.
started basically a battery recycling facility with obvious emphasis on electric vehicle batteries and just the amount of raw material they're able to re-extract and reuse. It's not 100%, but they're getting better and better with as battery tech gets better and as their knowledge of it all gets better. And that is an interesting story to follow over time as well. To see this new aftermarket segment grow is you know, basically when a current vehicle is out of life, decommissioned, it goes to scrapyard, it'll get
Hmm.
crunched, it'll become just a block somewhere
Hmm.
sitting on a shelf. Whereas now, to your point, we're tearing them apart, we're reusing what we can,
Hmm.
and it is an interesting, again, evolution of where we are in the industry.
Well, so the guy that you're speaking of is JB Straubel, and he created Redwood Materials. That's the company that you're speaking of, the Tesla co-founder. The cool thing to me, and I actually just did a story on this, it ran in the summer issue of Elite Traveler, is the notion of like Jaguar Land Rover has a partnership. Audi has an entire division that is dealing with battery recycling. Polestar, great company, right? Volvo's kind of sort of not related, but we're kind of sort of related, but we're not.
It's
um,
like Jeep and Wagoneer. It's
yeah,
muddy water.
sister,
Yeah.
cousin. Anyways, uh, I mean, they are leading the pack. Every single person. I talked to the head of sustainability there. Her name's Frederica. Uh, every single person there is considered a part of the sustainability team. And to me, that's really exciting because automotive for a while was an incredibly wasteful, like I said, they were chasing superlatives for so
Mhm.
long that there wasn't a cost, what was the ROI on that when it came to actual longevity?
Mhm.
And now that's a very different conversation, which to me is quite exciting. But the brands that are doing this are more in the yes, we're doing this than the no, we're not doing this. And that signals a tidal change to me that is once again really, really exciting in the midst of some of these, vehicles coming out where people are saying, oh, but it's not the best or the fastest or the coolest or
Right.
whatever. It's like, no, but there's all of this other stuff. And I use that word very purposefully. That's happening. That's
Mhm.
way more interesting to me than, oh, it's the fastest.
Yeah. So before we get into the last segment, I do want to
Yes.
talk a little bit more about how travel and automotive coincide
Yes.
in what you do, because you dropped driving Ferraris around Italy. What are some
Spain.
of, sorry,
Spain.
Spain. What are some of the most, and we will definitely get into this with the questions later on,
Sure.
interesting vehicle travel combinations that you've.
Ooh. This is actually a really good one. I recently drove a 1965 E-Type from the factory in England to Geneva to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the E-Type.
Oh, wow.
That was pretty wild. Uh, Driving through Switzerland and the Godard Pass and a vintage car is really fascinating. Double clutching is really takes a certain uh,
Rewiring of your brain?
sure,
Yeah.
let's go with that. But I did that, and it's very wonderful to be able to experience different ways of seeing the world, right?
Mm.
So when you're in a car and you're driving, it's a very different way of seeing the world than when you're on a train, when you're on an airplane. Obviously, there's a little bit of no duh there, but the manner in which how you're interacting with the landscape and then also with other people, right? It's like I would always try, especially when we were in England, to find like the smallest village, to stop at the smallest pub. Because, especially, in the, I don't even know if it's post COVID at this point, but let's call it in the post COVID era, that reconnection with
Mhm.
people is everything, right? It's from a car collector standpoint, from a human standpoint, from an explorer standpoint, from a wanderlust standpoint. Travel and cars for me in that regard go together. I mean, you pull up in a 1965 E-Type, people are going to come out. They're going to want to talk to you about the car. They're going to ooh and ah at the car. And some of that is fun, but some of that is also real connection,
Mhm.
right? Some of that is finding a way to connect with someone that you have probably surface level no similarities with,
Mhm.
but you instantly can start talking about something. And
Common
I think
ground.
as a world and as a one human to another human, we've missed that. Especially when you get into the like super small towns or the super rural places, and they're just like, "Who are you? What are you driving? What are you doing here? What?" But there's a beautiful charm to that, and a humanity to that that for me as a travel writer was missing hugely
Hmm.
in the midst of the pandemic. So that was when did I do that? I did that in June, in May, June, and I take my mom on a trip with me every year,
Okay.
and she came with me on that one. So it was quite funny to experience the world in that way. Um, that's one. I would say another one was everyone brands go to Lapland to do their ice testing, right?
Yeah.
To do their winter testing. And for me as a travel writer, the really cool pieces are, and I didn't know this, they actually thicken the ice on the lake. So they'll drill holes into the lake to thicken the ice to test the
Interesting.
car on the ice, which I know now, but I didn't know then. But there's this one hotel, and it's kind of a open secret amongst brands because you go there and all of the cars are covered in whatever hidden
Right.
design,
Camouflage.
wraps and camouflage and all of that, but the parking lot is filled with them. So there's a Jaguar here and a BMW over there and a McLaren over there, and all of these engineers are like hanging out in the sauna together trying to unwind and warm up after a freezing cold day. But to tap into that and to show up and to just be like, oh, okay, like this is the parking lot of uh, the next 5 years
Right.
of automotive is in this parking lot, but the engineers are in there talking about like northern lights and dog sledding.
Yeah.
And how cool is that? That was another trip that I did 2 years ago.
Wow.
I've been fortunate enough to do a couple of ice driving. One I did one with McLaren and one with Jaguar, and anytime you're on the ice, it's a good time. So, but same type of thing. It's that
Hmm.
humanity. It's that coming together. And I mean, I remember going out to a local bar, and the locals at that point are like perfectly
Right.
accustomed to McLarens sliding around their town, and it's like it ain't no thing. Um, but again, it comes back to the humanity of it. And for me, that's travel, and cars is just a way to tap into having a conversation with someone that doesn't look like you, that didn't grow up like you, that maybe doesn't have an immediate way of connecting
Right.
until you literally roll up.
Very interesting. Well, I could keep talking travel forever because that is something I have not done nearly enough in my life. For one of our anniversaries, I got my wife a scratch off calendar,
Hmm.
map of
Map.
the world. And I was looking at it just the other day, especially, the past 2 years and what they've done to the world. I was like, yeah, we need to travel more. There's way too much unscratched off on this map that we need to do. And it is her mission to go, I'm going to say 6, not 7, but to all the continents
Hmm.
because Antarctica is kind of a special exception. And she's definitely got me beat. She's been to China, she's been to Africa. So she's got Asia and Africa off the list already. I've been to neither, but just to get to, like you said, experience the world, the culture, the people, make those connections. It's quite awesome. But time.
Well, to
Okay.
be fair, there's 54 countries in Africa,
Right.
so
Right.
I'm sure
There's
she's got
more
some
to
work
go
to do.
back. Yes, there's absolutely more to go back. And I do believe she's only been on the one trip. So there's absolutely more to go back and see. But it's lower on her priority list because, well, I've already
Sure.
done that. I've already did. So, yes. But to close out, we
Yes.
have a segment called Random Misfire where I will ask you 8 kind of probing questions to learn a little bit more about you, going a little bit deeper into what I've learned about you thus far throughout the episode. And they're not meant to be gotcha or anything, but just to peel back a little more of the layers of what makes you you. And the first question I ask of everyone
Sure.
is, do you name your vehicles?
Without question.
Okay. See, I appreciate how quickly you answered that in the affirmative because not only did you get it right, which I joke that there are no wrong answers, but that one. But what are some interesting vehicle names that you've had in your past?
This is the first time I've ever been asked this question, and it brings me so much joy. So I currently have a white Lexus CT200H.
Okay.
I abhor white cars. I just think, and if you talk to the designers I've spoken to, white is the worst. It's kind of like, wearing horizontal stripes. It just more often than not, you don't look great. Um, so my current vehicle is Othello because Othello, it was a Greek tragedy. And because my car is white, I consider it a tragedy. So Othello is my current vehicle. I had a Toyota Tacoma long bed, and that was Longfellow.
Okay. I really like your
Uh,
naming strategy. It's very
yep,
good.
yep. So let me think of the other ones. Some of the other ones. I had a Volvo Cross Country when I was in college, and that was Mel, which was short for mellow because at no point did that car ever not have it handled. It's like you were in the snowdrift, you pressed the little W button, and it was like, what snow?
Yeah.
What? I don't need to be dug out. I got this. I'm chill. Why are you freaking out? I'm great. Uh, so those are a couple.
Nice, nice. Yeah, your strategy is a little bit better than mine. I tend to go with celebrities, and it's to each their own.
So what's your current vehicle and your current vehicle name?
So
Vehicle's name.
uh, I'm in an interesting point because my wife and I have yet to name her vehicle. We bought it
Mm.
together after getting married, and it's a 2014 Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk. And the biggest problem there is that we can't agree on anything.
Mm.
Again, my strategy has always kind of been celebrities, and prior to her, I was a single male, you can imagine. And so that strategy doesn't necessarily coincide with I have a wife now and a family. And so can't quite nail anything down there. And my current car is kind of a joke because I've even pulled up to do car reviews, and like I've had a general manager of a local dealership be like, now you mean to tell me that you are a car guy and you drive the most vanilla car in the entire world? I'm like, it's got a 6-speed manual, which it's a 2013 Chevy Cruze Eco with a manual transmission. Everybody's like, I didn't even know they
That's a
manual.
yeah, that's a head scratcher.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Props to you.
they had to go find that one for me because prior to that, I had a 2012 Camaro SS 45th anniversary 6-speed manual. And I said, if I'm going to go from this fun car to a vanilla car, there's got to be something
Yeah.
redeeming about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they found that one for me. But I've had, let's see, Angelina, I've had Scarlet. My truck, I had a Silverado. I live in Texas. I had to go country. So Sarah Joe, no celebrity there,
All
but
right.
had to
All
be
right.
2 names, had to be kind of country sounding. So that's my strategy.
All right.
Let's see. Ooh, this will be a good one. Do you prefer more tech or less tech in vehicles?
Oh,
I mean, that E-Type is like the pinnacle for some people, and there's like
correct.
no tech in that.
Correct. I like tech when it is convenient, but I think right now automakers are really pushing the bounds of why. Like,
Yes.
can I just have a knob for my volume? Please and
Yes.
thank you.
Yes. Honda realized it. They fixed it. But uh, just today, as you and I started talking, one of my Mercedes videos went up on
Mm-hmm.
my YouTube channel. And going back to my wife and her opinions and thoughts, she's like, why is there not a knob? Like, I have to be very intentional going down here just to change the volume, and everything's a touchscreen now. And
Mm-hmm.
you lose some of that tactileness. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, I agree. And I can see you're well versed in the Apple ecosystem over there. Apple has announced this fall their new iOS 16 will have the ability to take over all the screens in the car. And on the one side, I am also an Apple nerd. I'm like, oh, yes, please. But on the other side, I'm like, but then they're all just the same, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. It's an interesting. We're in an interesting spot.
Correct.
So that plays very well into new or classic.
To own and drive or to admire?
I feel like I can figure out just by that question back exactly where you're, how you would break that down. But yes, I will just answer back yes.
To own and to drive every day, I'm going to say new because I am without question not someone who can fix something when it goes awry. And I feel like to be a responsible classic car owner, you're either married to a mechanic or
Deep pockets.
correct. And for me, I love enjoying them and I love it when they're someone else's.
Hmm.
Uh, but to have it and to take on that responsibility for me and to take on that responsibility honestly is not a responsibility I want.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There is a reason why my last six vehicle purchases have been brand new. You know, I
Mm-hmm,
like the warranty. I like being able to take it to any shop. My
mm-hmm,
wife had a Mini Cooper when we got married, and here in Tyler, Texas, Mini is now owned by BMW, but
mm-hmm,
our BMW dealership wouldn't touch it. Like,
mm-hmm,
I swore off ever having a vehicle that was used regularly that did not have a dealership
mm-hmm,
footprint here in town for that reason. Manual or automatic?
mm-hmm. In Los Angeles, automatic. Not in Los Angeles, manual.
I feel you on that. Again, going back to that Camaro I had, NASCAR, pretty popular sport here in America. I was given free tickets. Swore off ever going back if it involved me driving my car. I
Mm-hmm,
was an hour out from getting in my car and I could still see the racetrack. I said never again. My left
correct.
leg was dead. So
Yep.
yes, I feel you on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Leads very well into ICE, internal combustion, or EV.
EV.
Without a doubt, like no hesitation whatsoever. What is your most interesting EV that you've sampled?
Oh,
Or maybe I should say most appealing to you, the one that just sticks with
I'm
you.
gonna I'm gonna give you most surprising because I got into the car and I was like, well, okay. So I Polestar. I got into the Polestar too, and they put me in the. We're just gonna we're not gonna get too nerdy about it. They put me in the fancier one.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, very fancy, very fancy. I see this. But, from the Polestar 1 to the Polestar 2, the whole point was to make it a little bit more mass market. You're
Mm-hmm.
not really doing that. So I get into the kind of base model Polestar 2. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is great. This is fun. It's in the shape of a sedan, but like this does things and this
Mm-hmm.
is exciting and this is fun. And yeah, I live in Los Angeles. I used to be a professional surfer and I still surf constantly. That's the running joke with all of the cars I get. I take almost all of them surfing.
Yeah.
And we're talking like S500 to DBX to, um, oh my goodness, 765 LT. Like they all went surfing. Put board racks on the top of that thing and like you're ready to go. And it was absolutely fun and interesting and dynamic. And I got in that car being like, okay, who gets excited about a base model anything?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, that's a hugely snobby thing to say and a hugely privileged thing to say. And I
Right.
see that. But when you're like, oh no, oh hell yeah,
Right.
yes, yes, and this is an EV. Like, go, go look at Polestar, guys.
Yes. So I had an opportunity to get in again the performance pack, however they brand it, at a track event with many other vehicles there,
Mm-hmm.
including the one I would say, even in shape, it most competes with in the Ioniq 5 from Hyundai.
Mm-hmm.
And sat down with the product specialist. It was actually loaned to us from a dealer, not the brand. Logistic nightmare. Doesn't matter. But he was very, very well versed in all things Polestar, talking about how they
Mm-hmm.
were ditching Napa leather to go to vegan leather, etc.,
Yep.
etc. And when he told me the price range, obviously being in the performance one, we were in rather expensive. But when he told me what the starting price of these were and comparing that again to that Hyundai, I was like, okay, now you're really onto something because you are that premium brand. Uh, the heritage and the sustainability and then the safety of the Volvo line carried
Mm-hmm.
through into Polestar definitely raised some eyebrows for me as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it will be interesting to see how, where, when that brand goes and develops.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, one, two, three, four, five. We got three more, and oh man, we've got on road or off.
Off.
Yeah, I mean, you've already shared some pretty awesome experiences, but outside of the Cullinan and
Mm-hmm.
just going crazy in that
Mm-hmm.
rolls, what kind of stands out to you in the off road space?
So this last weekend, how perfect is this? This last weekend, I actually took one of my good friends, Jeff. He's a incredibly accomplished photographer, and we took a Jeep Rubicon 392 and went to out to Sequoia National Forest on the other side of Bakersfield, uh, and went off roading and looked for roads to go off roading on because there's so much technology, and I think the TRX is a perfect, albeit somewhat ridiculous, but also perfect
Yes.
example of this, just in terms of and I was largely introduced to the notion of, spring dampering and being able to control the vehicle in a way that you just weren't able to before. When Defender came out and we can have the body on frame debate if you want to have that, but just again finding different ways to do things,
Hmm. Hmm.
embracing technology to find ways to make the ability to kind of crisscross. um, you can see what I'm
Yes.
doing, but for the people who are listening, the notion of the front tweaking one way and the back tweaking
Right.
another way, and just being able to traverse, it changes the roads that you take, it changes the way you go up a mountain. And I think the best way, obviously, to sample that technology is to go for it.
Hmm.
So, and it was funny when the Jeep guys came to pick it up. I was like, took it off-roading. I did rinse it off, but like took it off-roading. And they were like, good,
Yeah.
you should. Uh, and to me, it's a different skill.
Hmm.
I part of my traveling and part of my travel writing is based a lot on adventure. And to me, it's quite funny because people, it's kind of the people who are unwilling to travel are often the people who are unwilling to go on adventures,
Right.
and the travel people are very often also the adventure people. And just the biggest myth that I find myself dispelling to those folks who don't want to travel is you don't just go jump out of a plane.
Right.
You don't just go, you know, 40 miles per hour up a mountain. Like it's incredibly intentional and it's incredibly methodical and it's totally thought out. And there is a learning curve. You
Hmm.
know, I've been fortunate enough to do off-roading programs with a lot of brands to learn how to use it
Hmm.
because that's very important. But the reason I say off-road is because it's a different set of knowledge and it's a different way of driving. And it's one of those things where you truly have to, especially when you're getting quite technical and you're rock crawling or anything like that, you have to be in the moment.
Hmm.
You have to be fully present and paying attention. And 2 years ago, when did the Defender launch? 3 years ago at this point. I was the first US
2019,
journalist to get a
2020.
hold, yeah, to get a hold of a Defender. And uh, my contact at the time at JLR, I'm sorry, at Jaguar Land Rover, it was one of those toss me the keys, go break it. And I was like, I can't break a Defender. Like, they're unbreakable.
Right.
That's why ones from the 40s are still on the road. Like, seriously? But I ended up doing, I think it's called Hell's Backbone,
Oh, nice.
which is, yeah, a very technical, and I did it in the Defender. And I had a sign off from JLR to do it. And it was just so cool to see how capable that
Hmm.
vehicle is and to do it and to experience it. And you're in Utah and the scenery is ridiculously stunning and um, off road.
Yep. Yep. I've been in a Defender and loved it and was completely surprised by it because, again, bring in my biases. You briefly touched on, body on frame versus unibody and all that stuff. I was like, that's a really good vehicle. Like, not gonna scoff at it the way I once
Mm-hmm.
would. And then you bring up Wrangler 392. What was funny about that is we actually had requested of us, we put head to head the 392 against the 4xe electrified version. And they both have one pedal driving in a sense because
Mm-hmm.
the EV is your traditional one pedal driving. It uses a regen and all that stuff. But the just gobs of torque and the idle on that 392, your one pedal driving in that is basically the brake. You just
Mm-hmm.
modulate the brake and the Jeep does everything else. So,
Exactly right.
favorite driving song, playlist, genre, what are you going to on a good road trip?
Oh, I actually have a playlist. This is kind of answering the question, but I think it's a good answer.
Okay.
Uh, I actually have a playlist of 8 songs that I test in every vehicle I'm in because for me, sound system is really important.
Hmm.
Really, really, really important. Like I will sacrifice some things to
For a
have a
good,
good sound system. Uh,
fair enough.
and it's a variety of songs, it's a variety of genres, but to me, having that premium audio, excuse me, experience is absolutely paramount. And yes, it's on my Spotify, and yes, you can download it if you want it. But it tests a car system, and because I've heard those songs so many times, um,
Our
I
Maserati
know
guy brought
I
a
know them.
thumb drive with what he knew would sound good in the
Hmm.
Maserati he had brought to us. So, yes, I totally understand. All right, last one. We touch on your current vehicle being white,
Yes.
color, or grayscale. Like, where are you shopping? Obviously, you're not going white again, but You know,
No.
black, silver, and white are the most popular
Oh,
vehicle colors now, but just past your image on my computer is the Sao Paulo Lime GV60 that Genesis brought to us. And I
oof.
loved
Yeah.
that thing. So where do you fall on the color spectrum of things?
No black and white because both one is a tragedy and one is torture. So
I
no black
agree.
and white. I do think there are some redeeming grayscales.
Hmm.
Um, Mercedes always jokes their press fleet is 50 Shades of Gray, and it's hilarious because it often is. But like, I love some of their matte colors. They have a deep, like, forest mica green that is stunning. So I'm not going to say the like bright, insane, you think Lamborghini colors, because those, yes, they make a certain kind of statement. And for those people, that's their jam. Like, congrats. Uh, I would say I like the colors just off the grayscale.
Okay.
So I like those blues. I like those greens. I like some of the brands that play with matte. When Toyota came out with all of their muddy colors, the like muddy green and the muddy taupe, I like those, but I'm not, and I love a good red.
Hmm.
Like, if you have a sports car and it's not red,
Yes. Our Supra was red. Thank you, Toyota, for delivering that one. But
yeah,
yeah, okay, okay. Well, I thank you absolutely so much for coming on and playing along with
yes,
our questions here at the end. If people want to
sure.
follow you and all of the stuff that you're doing, the places you're going,
Yes.
how can our listeners find you?
So it is, I made the very wise decision to have all of my social media be my name. So it's at Alexandra Cheney on Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest, if that's a thing anymore, and TikTok and yep, every Twitter, all of the places, Alexandra Cheney.
And we will link those down in the show notes, make it really simple for you. Alexandra, thank you so much for coming. If you've got just a little bit more time, I've got 2 more questions for you for Behind the Paywall.
Let's do
On our
it.
on our Patreon, you can hear those questions yourself by heading over to patreon.com/GTGarageTalk. But thank you once more.
Yes.
And there you have it. We could have talked so much longer about travel, about cars, about a lot of things. And unfortunately, I was keeping an eye on the time. I do believe this episode probably ran longer than most just because so much common ground, so much I wanted to know, so much I wanted to get out of her. So we'll keep in touch. Hopefully I can have her back and we'll talk some more epic adventures in the future. But so grateful for Alexandra and her time here with me on this podcast. Again, you can find out more from her. We will link all of her social media down in the show notes below if you're interested in hearing and seeing more from her. And as always, you can head on over to patreon.com/GTGarageTalk to hear a couple additional questions in our segment that we call the Aftermarket, where I ask the same 2 questions of all our guests. And not just laying this out there. One of them may or may not have given her goosebumps. So, just very well tailored question for the guest this week. But as with always, we thank you for listening and supporting us. You know where to find us, gtgaragetalk.com. Find us at GTGarageTalk on all the social media. And until next time, Gearheads, bye.